everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Rebecca. Yep, and it is a chilly morning, but I've got some good stuff to talk to you about today, more on the midwife, and today will be the closing arguments in the Fort Worth police officer murder trial. So, you know, hey, good morning, everybody. Crafting Journey here, that Journey chick over on Instagram, and on my second YouTube channel, I'm known as The Leftovers. The link to that is down in the description. Don't forget today to leave a comment. Hit the like button if you enjoy the content. Share it with someone else that you think might also enjoy the content. And you can subscribe. It's absolutely free. I don't charge you a thing. I'm wearing my crochet hat. Yes. Did I crochet? Yeah, crochet. One of my favorites. Anyway, so cold out this morning. Poor Duncan. Like the water from the rain that we've had recently is like on the side of the street. Well, it froze over last night. There's like thin layers of ice on top of it. And poor Duncan slid into the ice. Slid on the ice. I didn't realize he was walking over it. And so now he's got very bad back legs. So he's sitting on his back legs and he's trying to get up with his front paws and they're sliding everywhere. So I had to pull him off the ice. And then he was able to get a grip on the dry pavement and get himself up. God, poor animal. He's old, but he just keeps on going. He just like ever-ready battery. Anyway, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another edition of Crafting and Crime Daily. We're going to talk about this day in history that comes last. First, we're going to talk about Aaron Dean case. They are doing closing arguments this morning. Right now, as we speak, they are doing jury instructions. The judge is reading the jury instructions to the jury, who, I might add, there are no black people on this jury. None. In a case where a former Fort Worth police officer is being alleged to have murdered a 26-year-old black female in her own home, no black people on the jury. Just an interesting little tidbit there. And they will also be sequestered until they reach a verdict. Yes. And I don't think they're going to have an easy time of it. I don't think the prosecution put on the best case that they could have. They just kind of, I don't know. I just think they could have put on a much better case, but they didn't. So there's a lot to debate about. Did he act reasonably? Did he act unreasonably? Was this murder? So both the prosecution and the defense rested yesterday after the defense put on an expert witness by the name of Jay Coons, a criminal justice professor, who said he acted reasonably. He does not believe that a crime was committed when he shot a Tatiana Jefferson. He said because there's been some debate about whether they should have called out and said, hey, Fort Worth Police Department, we're here, announce themselves. Well, this expert said that the mere presence of an officer in uniform is a form of an announcement. Okay. And he analyzed the video and he read everything, and so he just said, it was reasonable police work. It was, he acted the way he should have acted, and when he saw the gun, he acted with deadly force. He met deadly force with deadly force. So then the defense closed, rested, and then the prosecution on rebuttal put on their expert. I told you they needed an expert. So they put on Jonathan Priest, a retired police officer who specializes in testifying or consulting about use of force. How appropriate. He said, when they found the open door, they should have announced themselves, Fort Worth Police Department, and or called for backup, but they should never have left that front door. By leaving that front door, he said they opened themselves up to a lot of risk, a lot of danger. They should have stayed there at that front door. I'm not sure I disagree with him because, why did you leave the front? I don't know. It was open. Why did you leave? I don't know. You got 2 rookie officers here. I think the best course of action might have been to call for backup. But anyway, and regarding the whole window thing, he said the reasonable thing would have been just to step out of the line of sight of the window. Why did you shoot it? Why didn't you just back away? Then when she shot through the window, if she was going to shoot, it would have gone through the window. You wouldn't have been hit. Now, I don't know about that, but anyway, that was his opinion. Then afterwards, they closed. Everybody rested. So the judge brought the jury out and said, you are not going to hear any more evidence. You've heard all the evidence. And we're going to end early today because we're going to work on jury instructions. When you come back tomorrow, we're going to hit the ground running. I'm going to read you the jury instructions, closing arguments, and then you're going to begin your deliberations. So, like I said, as I'm speaking now, he's reading jury instructions. Then we'll get to the closing arguments. Should be interesting. I think this is a case that cries out for a hung jury. I think there's going to be a lot of debate back and forth. Was it reasonable? Was it not reasonable? Because honestly, in my head, I keep going back and forth with this. What would I have done? I'm not a trained police officer, so, it doesn't matter what I would have done, but I don't know. Did he act reasonably? He saw a gun coming up. I don't know. Anyway. We'll find out today or tomorrow or the next day, whatever the jury decides to finish their deliberations. I will go live with a verdict when there is one, barring that I'm not out doing something, which is probably rare. I don't leave the house much anymore. I'm a fun employee. Hi, Tutti. Hi, baby girl. You need to go outside? Un momento. She changed her mind. She didn't want to go outside. It's really cold out there. It is real bitterly cold today. It's in the 20s. But we have the sun. So now let's talk about the Angela Hawk case. Angela Hawk she's the midwife that was doing the home birth, attending the home birth of the No family for their second child, Vera. And this was totally the No's choice to do this at home. Now, I went to the web page for Angela Hawk and I read through her little, I'm cold now. I read through her little spiel and here's what she's advocating, that she's there as an attendant, but she believes that the women have the power to, historically, to give birth without intervention. You just watch it happen. And I'm there if you need me. I don't know. So just backing up a little bit. So she's the midwife that attended the home birth for the No's second child, Vera. Vera did not survive. And Angie is charged with felony child abuse resulting in death. Interesting charge, by the way. So yesterday they put on a paramedic that was on the scene. He said that when they got on the scene, they saw this woman and he identified the defendant, and he felt like she was a medical professional of some sort. He didn't ask, but you could tell that she was sort of running the show. He described what was in the birth trauma kit that they carry. Within that kit, there's a scalpel, and they said, "What's that for?" And he says, if in case we have to cut a cord, and if there's a delivery and they have to cut the cord. Okay, I get it, but Angela asked for scissors, so they give her trauma scissors. Now, this comes into play later on when we hear the expert. We'll get back to that. So, the reason he didn't transport right away, like he said, under normal circumstances, when they get to a birth where someone's in trouble, they just pick them up and go. But because they saw this professional on the scene who seemed to know what she was doing, they kind of let it play out. So he described a maneuver that they could do where you can put the fingers in and try to find the baby's airway, nose and mouth, and stretch against the perineum so that the baby can get oxygen or maybe take a breath. That, he said, it was just too tight. Then he witnessed Angela Hawk do an episiotomy with the trauma scissors that he gave. Now, we're going to talk about that later on. In fact, let me write that down because I want to come back to that episiotomy. Okay, so after the episiotomy, baby's still not coming. So this is the point where he's like, okay, we got to get this mother and baby out of here. So they call for that specialized board that they have. They put the mom on the board. He describes how they put her on it. They take her down the stairs head first to relieve the pressure of the baby and put her in the ambulance. Once, he said, just backing up a second, when he arrived on the scene and saw this breech baby born from, hanging basically from the neck down, and there's a question. I don't know if it was the neck and arms or just the neck. I'm not sure. I never really quite got that part. But in any case, when he initially saw the baby was pink, indicating the baby was oxygenating. But after they get the baby in the ambulance, the baby starts looking really bad. He said, we needed to do something. So he and whoever, the other paramedic in the ambulance, they decide, because she's on her back, they decide to get her up, knees to the chest, put her knees to her chest, get behind her and help her push. He said the first push was ineffective, but then the second push, he decided he would help. So now you got two big paramedics helping this woman push, and she was able to push the baby out. When the baby comes out, it is not breathing. It is floppy. It is not good. So they immediately start advanced life support for this child. And this was like seconds before they pull into the medical center. So the emergency trauma team takes over, birth trauma team takes over, neonatologists, OBGYN, they all take over and get this baby and continue life support. They actually take the baby up to the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, and then the OB attends the mother, and we'll get to that later. So, interesting thing was, in the ambulance, they wanted to start an IV on the mother, and she refused. Nope, don't want it. So she was still dictating care, even in the midst of this emergency crisis. Oh, don't want an IV. I'm thinking, oh, interesting. That's going to come into play, too, when the jury starts deliberating. How much of this was consented to by these parents? They did not want intervention. They wanted it all to happen naturally. So the next person on the stand was Catherine Lessman, Dr. Catherine Lessman. This is so disturbing. She looked like my 12-year-old niece. Like they look younger and younger. I know, young, an old person thing to say, isn't it? Like, she just looked like a baby up there on the stand. Every time I looked at her, I thought, oh, she's a child. She's a doctor, full-fledged OBGYN professor with, residents that work under her. And I'm thinking, but she's 12. No, anyway, I know, I'm so old. That's my grandma spiel. Anyway, so she starts, and when she first took the stand, I'm thinking, okay, she's an expert. She's going to talk about standard of care, what should have been done, what should have been done. I was a bit confused. And then later on, I find out, oh no, she was the OBGYN that was in the emergency room, that was part of the resuscitation team. Oh, so you're a training physician and an expert. Okay. So they had her start out by talking about, childbirth and different breech positions. And apparently this was an incomplete position. From what I could understand, and I don't know, because I don't know if Angela's going to take this stand and testify in her own defense. I would love for her to do that because I'm being selfish and I want to understand how this baby was entering the world. But it sounds like the baby was sort of like in a squat, where like if you were squatting down, so the toes were kind of next to the buttocks. So the buttocks and the toes were coming at the same time. But I think when Emily was in that bathroom by herself, she delivered the baby breech, I think it was, let me back up here. Prior to her going into that bathroom by herself, the midwife had already identified toes. So I'm curious, did she identify the buttocks and the toes? What kind of position was this? Then Emily goes into the bathroom after they decide they're going to proceed with this breech delivery at home. But after she goes into the bathroom, and then by the time she calls out for Angela to come in and help her, like 10 minutes later, this baby is out from the waist down. So, and she's like leaning on the side of the tub, almost like on her elbows and knees. So this expert talks about a lot of things. She was on the stand all day long. So she's describing all these different breech positions. And now, given what we know about this case, how should this have been handled? Well, she said, when she identified the toes, right then, she should have gotten these people to the hospital. But even before that, she said, when you talk about a vaginal birth after a C-section, it is very, very dangerous to try that at home. This is not something she would have ever recommended for any of her patients, and I understand that. It's a really huge risk, not of a breech, but a huge risk of uterine rupture, which is not what happened in this case. So she said that there's a special kind of forceps that is available to them, because she was asked what would have been the difference if this had happened in the hospital versus at home. She said, well, we have specialized forceps, we have resources like the neonatal intensive care unit, the resuscitation unit. They would have been right there by the bedside. We would have they had all these resources that was not available to them at home, including these specialized forceps. She says, but even when they first identified the toes, we would have recommended a C-section. C-section, yeah. So it probably would never have gotten to the point that it did in a hospital setting. And she went so far as to say she had never seen this in a hospital setting, because you just don't let it get that far. As soon as you see those toes, she said, if the mother's refusing the C-section, there's manipulation that you can try to do to turn the baby, push the baby back up and turn the baby. And there's things that you can try to do. It's very painful for the mother, but it can be done. So then we get to the part where she said she was the treating, so when Emily gets to the hospital, the baby comes into the emergency room. She said this baby was floppy and purple and clearly not looking good. So they were, the neonatologist was part of this resuscitation team. So she took care of the mother. The neonatal guy took care of the baby, takes it up to the NICU. Her job was to assess the mother. Now, she's doing all this as a supervisor of the senior resident, who's actually the one doing the work. But they identify episiotomy, But they call it a first-degree laceration because she didn't know what else to call it, because it's not, it was done by an unlicensed person at home who's not a medical professional, and it's a clean cut versus a tear, and what do we call it? So when you're talking about degrees of laceration, a fourth degree is the absolute worst, and very unusual, and it's reportable. First degree is like so minor, it's not even worth mentioning. It's just a teeny tear. And that's the equivalent of what this episiotomy turned out to be. Something so minor, it probably wasn't even worth mentioning. Didn't require a repair. So it's not like the midwife took the scissors and just like, it was very small. And when Emily got to the emergency room, she had not yet delivered the placenta. So they took her up to the labor delivery unit to, make her more comfortable and get the placenta delivered and that kind of thing. Then the next day, the team met, the resuscitation team met, the neonatologist, the OBGYN, the ER doctor, and they decided that this needed to be reported, that they are mandatory reporters. They were very concerned that this mother had been coerced into staying home for this birth after the breach was identified, and that these parents had been falsely reassured, and that this was something that needed to be investigated. And then the police could do whatever they wanted with it, but this team felt this had to be reported. And since it was a home birth, it fell under sort of her ballywick or whatever, and she should be the one to report it. So she is actually the one that called social services and reported this, or called the police. I don't know who she called. She called somebody and she reported it. So now you get the police out investigating it. And this morning, as I'm speaking, the police officer, the investigator, is on the stand. And he's going to talk about how he conducted the investigation and everything like that. So on cross-examination was, presented with the scenario that this home midwife was presented with. Suppose you are at home and you come upon this, and the baby's delivered waist, from the waist down. What would you have done? You're in a home situation. And she said, an episiotomy with a scalpel or with trauma scissors. Here's what you've got the choice of: scalpel or trauma scissors. Which one are you going to use? Trauma scissors. Very interesting. She would have used the trauma scissors, because now she's at home. There's none of these specialized forces, forceps or additional resources. So she would have done the same thing this midwife did, which I thought was very interesting. Then the defense tried to, make hay of the fact that, in other countries, don't women give birth at home all the time? And the judge just shut that down right away. No, we're not going to talk about other countries. We're not going to talk about what they do in other states, because she tried to ask her, well, aren't these home births legal in other states? Which they are. It's just Nebraska that they're not. And so the judge, he didn't want to hear that. He says, our only concern is Nebraska, where this took place. Let's see, have I covered everything? She thought this was a preventable death. This was entirely preventable. What else? I think that she was on the stand all day, and she was asked some very, very complicated, convoluted questions. And I thought, how in the world is she going to answer that? And she'd think about it. Very smart woman. And then she would come up with an answer that was reasonable, I thought, and interesting. But anyway, so that's where we are with that case. Both of these cases are so gosh darn interesting. Just when I think it can't get any better with these trials, it gets better. I know. I'm weird. All right, so what happened this day in history in the crime arena? So 20 years ago today, December 14th, 2012, was the Sandy Hook shooting massacre. Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. And we'll get to the Alex Jones portion of that later, but I think everyone can remember this case because of the recent Alex Jones trial that I covered, 2 trials that I covered, the one in Texas, the one in Connecticut. So Adam Lanza, that morning, he's 20 years old. He kills his 52-year-old mother. He's living with his mother. He kills his 52-year-old mother, takes her guns. Now, why this 52-year-old mother has a semi-automatic weapon and 2 semi-automatic pistols, I don't know, but she does. Anyway, so he takes this and he goes to Sandy Hook Elementary. He had gone to this elementary school back in the day, and no motive could ever be identified for what occurred here, but the school was locked, so he could not get in, but he shot out a plate glass window and entered through the window. Now, inside the school, this principal and a school psychologist, they hear this noise, and so they run out to the common area, and they see this guy, and they're shot and killed. He then takes a right, proceeds down this hallway, and then enters the classrooms that were on the right of the hallway. The first classroom, he kills 2 teachers and 15 first graders. Then he goes into the next classroom. He kills 2 teachers and 5 first graders. There were 12 girls and 8 boys that passed away as a result of this event, and 6 faculty members. Then he's in this room, and the police are closing in on him, and he kills himself. So we don't get a trial, no crafting and crime trial. Nope. So they identified that he had significant mental health issues during his lifetime, but nothing that would have indicated to anyone that this could have been predicted or prevented or anything like that. And then President Obama calls for gun reform, for increased background checks is really what his focus was. Let's get some increased background checks on these guns. So maybe Adam did buy the guns. I'm not sure. But in any case, the Senate blocked it. So this never happened. The increased background checks didn't happen. At least not during Obama's term because of the Senate. Yeah. And these parents of these kids, even today, because I'm on some kind of mailing list. I don't know how I got on this mailing list where they tell me what they're doing. And they recently took a trip to the Capitol to argue against assault weapons. They want a ban on assault weapons. Me too. Me too. Yep. So Alex Jones, he is the conspiracy theorist. At the time, he had a YouTube channel. He had all this social media that was all later on shut down for this inaccurate information. But he puts it out there that this is all a hoax. It's a hoax. It's the government. They want to take away our guns. This never happened. These are all crisis actors. Well, this was all litigated in 2 trials that I covered. If you want to find the playlist for that, I can link the playlist up here. But both juries, well, the judge, because Alex would not cooperate with the litigation, entered a default judgment against him, saying, okay, you are liable for defamation, for lying about these parents. And in both cases, Texas and Connecticut, and he has more cases pending. But so the jury had to decide damages, and the award in Texas was in the millions, and the award in Connecticut was like hundreds of millions. So for these family members, yeah, interesting trial. If you're not familiar with it, you probably want to check that out. But so 20 years ago is when that happened. The school was demolished, never reopened, and I think in 2014 or 2017, they built a whole new school right there on that same grounds, but they built a whole new school. that is this day in history. And I did not do much crafting today. I am so close to being done with this thing. I just have like this little bit in here. It's not a little bit, it's a lot. But and then the white part here, which is time consuming. And then I'll be done. My goal is by Christmas. So I have how many days? 13 days till Christmas? Something like that. I don't know. On the first day of Christmas, my true love came to me. A partridge in a pear tree. Okay. Being silly. All right. And why? Because I can. Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great Wednesday. Tonight, I'm going to be live. Craft with me Wednesday. I haven't picked a craft yet. I'm thinking I'm going to get out the dog hoodies and we're going to crochet. So, but I don't know. I might change my mind. Why? Because that's what I do. That will be at 6:30 Central Time. Look for the thumbnail, and I will see you then. Bye, everybody. Take care.